It works. Good afternoon. Ooh, I didn't mean to turn. Hold on. There we go. A little playing with all the little buttons in the room. Good afternoon. My name is John Mayer. I'm the executive director of CALI, and Ron Staudt wasn't able to make it. He was giving, matter of fact, almost this exact presentation in Finland last week, and ate some bad lutefisk, and so he got he got some sort of stomach flu, and the doctor said don't travel. So he's not here today. But I could give this talk as well as he could, because I helped develop the software, and I'll even throw in some technical aspects that him being a law professor and my friend of 20 years, wouldn't be able to do. I'm a little stunned to have so many people show up. I mean, I thought we'd do this little Apps for Justice session, and for the crowd that usually comes to the CALI conference, there wouldn't be, very much interest. So I'm curious to know what you think you're going to hear about today. What are your expectations for this? Anybody? Yeah. What do you think? What do you think when you hear Apps for Justice?
Is it like access to justice?
Access to justice squared. That's good. Yeah. There's a certain amount. I can't control the volume, but I can. Speech volume. Is that better? Is that better? Is that better? Yeah, there we go. I appreciate that. I hate mics. I prefer to boom my voice just as a natural, because it's more of sort of like an internal yin energy thing. I don't know. So access to justice squared. Yes, it's like Zittrain, who wrote a book called The Future of the Internet and How to Prevent It. And he talks about generativity, or applications that have generativity. In other words, applications that you don't just use, but that also generate new applications or new ideas. And so I will bring that idea back up when I show you a piece of software we developed. What else did you think when you heard Apps for Justice? Excellent. Teaching, matter of fact, one version of this is teaching law students to program, which some people go, I went to law school because I don't do math, right? But an awful lot of law practice, at least from my perspective, I'm an engineer and not a lawyer. I come to it and I see the way lawyers practice, and I see flow charts, or I see steps, I see programming. Sometimes not nearly as precise as you might write a program, but I see a certain amount of engineering going on, even if the users or the experts, the lawyers, aren't aware that they're structuring what they do. And I see that, therefore, some aspects of what lawyers can do can be automated. And it may not be, and it's not the old saw of we're all going to be replaced by computers, or computers will take over the world, or all our jobs will be lost. It's far more of what computers have actually done for everybody, which is to say, we're not replaceable, we're just better with them, right? I'm a better writer because I have a word processor and not a typewriter. I'm a better whatever it is I do because I can look things up on Google and stuff like that. Larry.
Justice sounds like something that should run on your smartphone or your touchpad.
Yeah, it's very web. Oh, is that it? Is that it? You're thinking that this is going to be smartphone Web 2.0 type things? Yeah, maybe. I mean, we're absolutely thinking, and I'll show you. I can't show you what we've got, but I'll tell you what we're planning in that direction. Well, that's good enough because the rest of the answer to that question would get me into my talk. So I'll just get started. So I wanted to start off with like two things that were extremely successful access to justice successes in the past. The first one you may not know much about. It's LSC's TIG program. I'm going to be throwing a lot of TLAs at you, but I'll stop to explain them, or you should stop me. LSC stands for the Legal Services Corporation. It's the quasi-governmental organization that gets governmental money, gives it to legal aid attorneys to serve the poor in civil matters, right? TIG stands for their Technology Initiative Grants, which they're giving, in which they give money to legal aid organizations to do coordinated technology projects. Okay, back before 2000, everybody needed a website, and so the several hundred legal aid organizations around the country would each get a couple of $1,000s from LSC, and they'd throw up a brochureware website. And about 2000, LSC said, we're not going to give any one organization money for a website anymore. You have to coordinate with all the other legal aid organizations in your state and create one statewide website, which was, that meant cooperation and stuff like that. That was hard for them. And the TIG program has since gone on to do many more things. As a matter of fact, fund the A2J Author software that I'm going to talk about. But the results of it have been a hockey stick of success in terms of the amount of access by people who wait in line to see legal aid attorneys. Right? 80% of the people that are eligible to see a legal aid attorney for a legal problem can't even get in the door. There aren't enough attorneys to service them, even though they're eligible and their issue is eligible for them to be seen. All right, the second thing I wanted to talk about that relates to this is CLEPR. Now, I didn't know what CLEPR meant, but it stands for the Council on Legal Education and Professional Responsibility. Does anybody know what CLEPR is, besides Larry? It's interesting that this room doesn't know what CLEPR is. How many of you know what a law clinic is in a law school? CLEPR did that. In the 60s, I think it was 68, the Ford Foundation gave $10 million to CLEPR and said, why don't you start, or I don't know exactly how it was coordinated, why don't you start creating clinics in law schools so that supervised students would learn how to practice the law by providing free legal services, generally to the poor. All right, it started out in just 5 schools. The next year it was like 20 schools. The next year it was 50 schools. And of course today it's like about 200 schools, or almost all law schools have clinics now. And that, I mean, it didn't have to be that, right? Somebody had to get that ball rolling. And it was 40 years ago that happened under something called the CLEPR project, or the Council on Legal Education and Professional Responsibility. So when you hear CLEPR, think law clinics, right? Law school clinics. So here's what I meant by that need. There is 50% of those seeking legal help at these agencies, at Legal Services Corporation's agencies, are turned away. Even though they work on 1 million cases a year. They're the largest law firm in the world, right? But they're not one law firm. They're, a distributed law firm, you might say. 80% of the poor and the working poor do not have access to legal services. This is, again, I'm going to step out of my sort of what I'm doing here and just look at this as an engineer and say, what's wrong that we have this gigantic need for lawyers, and all I hear, even today, was all these lawyers can't get jobs. There's a bridge needed there, right? These people want lawyers. These people want clients, and yet we can't figure out a way for them to make, I guess, a living wage and for them to get representation. Right? It's a huge problem. It's a stupid problem. It seems to me a failure of imagination problem, but there you have it. So as a result, an awful lot of people are, for whatever reason, choosing to represent themselves in court. Right? I once gave a talk in England, and I put up a slide. I said, everybody in the United States is a lawyer. And they're like, what? I said, everybody can represent themselves, so everybody is potentially a lawyer, right? You can walk into court, you can file your own papers, you can do your own work. Now, that doesn't mean you'll be a good lawyer, but everybody is a lawyer. And so legal education of the public is essentially, something that's important. And that I was talking about free access to the law as well, right? So today, an awful lot of people are representing themselves. There's been a significant increase in self-representation in California divorce cases, for example. In 2009 in Chicago, creditor cases tripled. And almost all creditor cases are self-represented or pro se. So you could say that those cases have tripled. All right? So pausing for a moment to give you a little bit of history. Back in 2000, Chicago Kent and the Illinois Institute of Design and the National State Council, wait. State Justice Institute and the National Center for State Courts put together a significant amount of money to do a research project on how do you meet the needs of self-representing litigants, people that are going to walk into the courtroom themselves. And so they sent design students off to various county courts to watch the process and be appalled by it, by the way. They were appalled at the customer service sort of aspect of how our courts run. That research was done in the 99-2000. The immediate result of that was the development of a prototype. I'll show you that in a second. And then following that was A2J Author. They wrote a book. The book is not like an easy-to-read light thing. It's like a recipe book. It's got 100 different ideas generated by these students. And these are after they generated 1,000 ideas, and they culled them down to the top 100 on how the justice system might be changed in some way. And some of them are awesome, and some of them are loopy because they weren't lawyers. They were design students coming at this as though this was a design problem. First time it had ever been done that we know. We couldn't find any literature on it. You can't even buy this book. It was a limited run. I've got like a copy or two left, and I've been trying to figure out how I can get the digital file so I can get it up online, because we don't want to make money. We want to make it available. So it identified the major barriers to access to justice, did ethnographic research in 5 courts, employed the latest in system design methodology. If you know anything about design schools, IIT's Institute of Design is either 1 or 2 in the country. All right? Design schools, it's the Stanford, Harvard, MIT of design schools. Yeah. It's pretty awesome, and they were really cool to work with. So this was the prototype they came up with. They said, let's automate one thing that a lot of people are representing themselves on, joint, simplified, dissolution of marriage. This was coded in ASP or something like that. Remember, this was 2000. And this is what we learned, that the interface, spent a huge amount of time, hired a design company to come up with this interface. And the goals were, your typical pro se or self-represented litigant is English as a second language or an immigrant, didn't finish high school, is stressed out because they're representing themselves in some legal matter. Well, we're all stressed out when we're doing that, but especially because of all these problems. And may not be very internet literate. Again, remember this was about 2000, 2002, so that's a curve that's changing a little bit. And so they wanted to create a screen that had as little clutter as possible, lots of white space. It's very sort of TurboTax. In other words, one question per page, but not looking like a JavaScript form, right? They wanted to pull away from the form-ishness of court forms and do it as sort of a dialogue. And you've got your little guide there that basically walks you through down this path to justice, which is often the horizon. I'll show you the live version of this in just a second. So they tested that on a bunch of people whose completion rates was off the charts compared to just filling out JavaScript forms. But we also learned that just automating one process was incredibly expensive. Right? You had to have a programmer, you had to have a designer, you had to have the lawyer in there, and not just any lawyer. We worked with legal aid attorneys who were familiar with the problems that relatively unschooled people have in the justice system, and in how you would walk people through the filling out of a form. And so the solution was, well, we don't need to write programs that automate forms. We need to write an authoring system that lets non-technical people, legal aid attorneys, create automated forms themselves. Right? That's what I meant by generativity. We need an authoring thing. And so we naturally called it A2J Author. All right? So I'm going to skip a bunch of slides by just showing you how A2J Author actually looks and works. So this is what A2J Author, and I'm in the authoring system, I'm not in a live system, looks like to the author. And this is just a sample one. It's got a bunch of pieces that might not appear in your average one, but it has some like demo things. So I'm going to go back to 1 here. And And basically, we got this guy, and so we hit continue. Right. So it's got the ability, if the author wants to record what's being put on the screen and stick it in there as just a voice file that comes up, they can do that. Right. Multiple ways of interfacing with the computer. You're typing or you're listening. It helps some people who are maybe scared or unfamiliar with this. So I type in my name. I go to the next one. All right, now I've already been playing around with this, and I had previously chosen female. I'm going to choose male now because I want you to see what happens. So it picks a... Yeah, thank you very much for that. So it picks an avatar for you that at least matches your gender. And that represents you, the user, with the guide, taking you on this path to justice. Now, I won't go into this at length, but I will say that endless blood was spilled over the design of these avatars, and it went all the way from photorealistic or photos of people, and what you should do is put up a chart and say pick your guide, and they had to be black and white and brown and yellow and in a wheelchair and out of a wheelchair, and then it just got ridiculous. And then we said, okay, we're going to collapse it down to cartoons, and so then it became like Microsoft Bob and little Merlins and little paper clips and stuff like that. And we're like, no, this is serious. We actually need a human. We got to make this. And so we ended up with, as a generic-looking sort of cartoon representation as possible, and even that was hotly debated. But we've been using this for about 6 years, and for the most part, people want to get their court problem dealt with and don't complain about it. It's only those of us who obsess about interface issues and things like that go, oh. And matter of fact, when we named the image files for these, I didn't name them. This isn't a white woman or white man. This is blank woman and blank man. And there is a brown version of this. We finally had to cave into that, but we call that tan woman and tan man. So obviously the design of something that has this sort of like social impact results in political correctness discussions, ad infinitum. It's not wrong. It's just part of the design process that you have to deal with and overcome. All right. So you can see what's happening. One question at a time is being asked. You can ask all sorts of different types of questions. You can have fill in the blank, multiple choice. You can have check boxes. You can have little essay boxes and things like that. And I'm going to go into the authoring part of this. And so this is what the interview, we call them guided interviews, looks like from the author's viewpoint. And this is essentially a flow chart. And this is the most simple and demo-ish of an interview. It's probably not a bad idea to go do something scary here. Let's go open up. Let's open up like a big one, a real one. Yeah. A2J. The best ones are in here for me. Law interview. Yeah, law interview. Oh. Yeah, there's a messy one. So this is, interestingly, this isn't even an interview that results in a court form being generated. This is an interview that is online intake. So it's being used by a legal aid organization in Ohio where if you can't call in, you can go to the web and it asks you a whole bunch of qualifying questions. Do you make a small enough amount of money? Is this an actual civil matter, not a criminal matter or a parking ticket or something like that? Things that legal aid doesn't do, right? And what they found with online intake is that an awful lot of people have stopped wasting their time, and an awful lot of people are not wasting time trying to get through to legal aid, only to be instantly turned down when they find out that their problem doesn't qualify for talking to legal aid. So just that alone has been like an amazing thing. The second thing is, the way A2J Author is designed is to ask questions, but there's all sorts of ways to give the user back information. There's something called a Learn More button in which, here, let's go say yes. Here, we'll say John. I'm going to be a male again. So here's an example. Have you ever applied? Are you already a client? I can tell you that the first three knock you into a page that basically says, well, we can't help you, or you should call this number. They direct you off. They triage you, so you're not going to waste a lot of time trying to do something that you're eventually not going to be allowed to do. It's interesting to take a look at that. Let's see if I can pull that up. Yeah. So this is essentially, I'm editing this screen, right? I just type text into here. I can add my audio there. I can do the simple bold, underline, italic. I can create a Learn More button that has a pop-up with some information. I can add video or images to that if I wanted to. Here's where I add buttons, and if I look at the advanced under this button, I've actually got some program logic here. This, to me, was the scariest part of the design because I had to make lawyers think about logic, like if-then statements and stuff like that. It turns out that they utterly aced it. They're like, oh yeah, this is easy. And matter of fact, our software is not powerful enough. They want to write 1,000-line Perl scripts in there. And I'm like, nah, we want to make this available to other people too. So if you see, there's like a before income, pension, true, false. That's a variable is equal to false. True, if it's true, then set the pension income. It's basically setting little program variables that will make decisions that will branch based on the input from the person, right? So if it's going along and says, do you have any kids? No. Well, then it's not going to say, and what's their names? Or what are your assets? And if you click car and checking account, then it doesn't ask you, and what's your Social Security and what's your alimony? It's smart enough, or it can be programmed in a way to be smart enough to get you to the point fast. All right? Any questions so far? Oh, you want to see the XML? We got a techie question. All right. Hold on, I think I'm clicking on the wrong part of it. There we go. So the whole interview, the interview text and all of the code is saved as a separate XML file, and that's all that it looks like. So it's an XML format that we invented. It's not based on anything. I don't know that there is any XML format for generalized rule decision processing or something like that. Sorry?
What do you do with it once it's generated?
Well, this is the interview. So the interview is an XML file, and there's a player that we wrote that plays the XML. Right. So we keep the code away from the interview, right? Because it means we can also do. Other people could write a player, and they wouldn't have to know anything about our player. They could just act off of what they find in that XML. All right. It's essentially a programming environment, an IDE, integrated development environment, with the ability to set and create variables. You can add more or fewer steps. You can generate reports. In some cases, there's the ability to generate a report that you hand to a translator because it contains just the text, and so the translator takes the text from that report, creates the translation in whatever language, and then you can copy and paste it back into an interview so that you have it in a different language. We're actually working on expanding that capability because it's becoming something more important. But it's actually a really hard problem. Not translation, but the process of managing the translation process. See, again, we're always trying to think generatively, or what's the meta issue around doing not one of these, but 1,000 of these or 10,000 of these. All right. So let me go back to my slides. So basically, they're guided interviews. When the person is finished filling out a guided interview, they click a submit button, and what A2J Author does is it generates a different XML file. Right now, the XML file is in a hot docs format. All right, so hot docs can consume that file. It can merge the variables that were collected from A2J Author and turn them into a completed document, which is then sent back to the user in either PDF or RTF format. They can print it, sign it, submit it. And when the world gets a little bit better about e-filing, instead of that generation step coming back to the user, instead maybe they can just submit it right to the court system as a PDF or something like that. That's not quite. We're talking with courts about how to do that, but it's. But what we don't want to have to do is write 3,000 different ways of doing that. It would be nice if everybody, stuck to a particular standard. So A2J Author is sort of joined at the hip with hot docs at this time for that purpose. All right. So this is what it looks like. A typical website user shows up, goes to a statewide website. I mentioned that at the beginning. So here's Illinois Legal Aid. Has a problem and sees that they can handle it by filling out a form, criminal expungement, simplified divorce, fee waivers, things like that. It gets redirected to another website, and I didn't talk about this. It's called Law Help. It's actually called Law Help Interactive. Remember when I said LSC didn't want to give money to a whole bunch of people to write a website? They said everybody in the state must cooperate. Well, they also did some grants at the national level. They said they don't expect every state to have to put up a document generation website. They gave money to probono.net, which is a nonprofit in New York, to run a national web server that handles all of the document assembly for all of the states. And they also host all of the A2J guided interviews as well. So you link through from Illinois to the Law Help Interactive. You run the form. Now you're talking directly to them. And, that's where your form gets generated and back to you. Uh-huh.
So the
Almost all the forms are on the Law Help Interactive website, so it's a one national server, but they're created by local legal aid organizations who have either got local money or trained somebody locally or gotten grant money from LSC or from bar foundations or IOLTA funds, right? All right, so how big is this? This is actually starting to hockey stick, as we say. 32 states and 4 countries. There were 500 guided interviews a couple of years ago. There's over 1,000 now. They generated over 500,000 documents last year. Let me see if I've got... This was the latest graph I could find. So the green there is last year, and the orange is 1/4 of this year. So you can see, this is what I mean by the hockey stick. It's starting to go up in terms of the number of documents generated and the number of interviews, because not all interviews result in documents, right? A lot of times people show up, fill it out, and realize, oh, wait, I'm in the wrong place. I don't qualify. This isn't the best thing to do, whatever it is. They get triaged out the same way as I described before. So this is good. This represents like about 50 lawyer years of work equivalent if these people had made it themselves into a legal aid office and spent an hour or so with a real lawyer. Now, is this the same thing? Is this representation? No, it's not. Right? We got to be really clear that there isn't any client-lawyer relationship being made by people who fill out forms for themselves. Is there advice being given? No, not advice. Guidance. All right, I'm not a lawyer, and so I'm speaking carefully because I don't understand all this crazy crap about the difference between guidance and advice. But I do realize that as an engineer, it is a constraint to my design issues here, and so we have to figure out a way to make this work, in those situations. All right, do you all know what I'm talking about when I say those things? Just nod. Yes. All right. Good. Because I don't totally get this. All right. So here's the payoff, or so here's the thing. Klepper helped establish U.S. in clinical education, 68, 78. It represented this giant increase in the number of hours of representation to poor people because it was law students doing the work, essentially free. It was like legal aid. Not most law school clinics aren't legal aid organizations. They're not funded, which is to say they're not funded by the Legal Services Corporation, right? They're separate or different from it. There is a friendly relationship there, but not a very formal one, I've found. So the idea is this: apps for justice clinics. Let's pull both of these together. Law school clinics A2J Author and technology and the legal aid folks who have already started to hockey stick these ideas of automating forms, right? Ron, I think that's Ron's grandson. That's why he stuck it in there. He did some of the slides. I did some of the slides. All right. How does this work? Well, first of all, it's not just a kooky idea. We've actually done it for a year at Chicago Kent, right? There was we had students do the research, learn about how all the issues around a particular issue, and then do some field observation. Wow, the thing just went up back there. Write a scope document, do a research memo, storyboard the idea, and then dive into A2J Author and Hot Docs to actually code the guided interview over for the students a long, grueling semester. All right? So what this gave the students was a deep dive into the law that they were working on, that they were automating, and into procedure, which law students hardly ever see unless they do clinic work, and into heuristics. You know what the word heuristics means? It means like shortcuts. That's how I think of it, or gut feeling, or the way you can get things done without having to go through all the technical thinking about it. Well, an awful lot of lawyering is attaining a heuristic for how you can get things done efficiently. Well, if you want to guide someone through a difficult legal process, you don't want to train them at the same depth and level that you have as a law student or as a lawyer. You want to basically explain to them in small words. Remember, English is a second language. Maybe didn't finish high school. Maybe are afraid of computers. So you have to use plain language as much as possible. And that is actually good lawyer training, good interviewing skills, you might say, right? It exposes them to the ethical and the policy issues. You know, am I giving advice or am I just guiding here? And it gives them key competencies because I believe Ron believes this too, but I believe that this is the way all lawyering is going to be in the future. You know, people are going to go to websites and say, I want to talk to the attorney, and the attorney's going to say, well, yeah, first of all, fill this form out, and that way you don't have to waste the expensive attorney's time. Right? And I believe that the government is going to start saying, you know, we just can't afford to have people answering the phone and sitting around to the DMV giving you crappy service. So we're going to put up a crappy website. Right? And the government will say, this is the way that you deal with us, through automated forms. Right? And I kind of am glad that we're, with this project, getting out a little bit in front of it so that we can show you how it's done right. And so that maybe once this starts to become more ubiquitous, we could also say, and that XML you saw before, yeah, that's machine readable. That means it's machine auditable and also transparent. And I think that's going to be really important that the government be transparent about the automated processes that it puts its citizens through for filling out forms. And I don't just mean justice or courts. I mean zoning and administrative law and all the other things that governments do. So anyhow, students would get exposed to all of this in a microcosm if they were to write guided interviews. Right? So we've put together a proposal that we've submitted to Legal Services Corporation to create a national initiative called the Apps for Justice Clinics. We'll develop course materials. Of course, we'll base them on the Chicago Kent stuff and on our CALI stuff. We'll fund 5 faculty, I don't know what the amounts are, at 5 schools to create their own. In other words, this is Klepper all over again, right? We'll start with 5 schools. If it works, then we'll see if we can get more funding to do 10 schools and then 20 and then 40 and so on. We need to match students to projects, and we need to market this idea. But we think that this is like a brilliant idea. And this would produce what Staudt calls a virtuous cycle, right? So Apps for Justice clinical courses will create skills and core competencies, and it will actually generate real guided interviews that are used by real people that need real legal assistance to obtain access to justice. So the legal aid people who are like, 80% of the people they're saying go away, well, maybe now they can say only 70% of the people are going to go away. All right, that was a bad joke. At least we can start to tackle the mountainous problem that we've got. And if you imagine it being like Klepper, where we went from 5 schools to 200 schools and went to millions of hours of representation, well, Maybe we could have millions of forms automated such that people would prefer, or people would, at the very least, we could deal with all the low-hanging fruit, all the easy stuff. We're not going to be able to do child custody and domestic violence on a website, right? But maybe we can do the no-fault divorce and all the bankruptcy and all the other things that are less emotion-ridden or less requiring of a human being involved. Or at least we can pluck the boring, bureaucratic, form-filled parts out of any legal process, wherever it is at the steps, and make those as efficient and error-free as possible. I'm excited by that as an engineer. So we presented this idea at New York Law School, had something called the Future of Legal Education back in April. The way they did it was they had 8 or 10 people doing a pitch, and everybody in the audience had $1 million that they could pretend to say, I would fund that. And won $10.5 million. Boy, I wish we could cash that check. That's Ron on the right. That's Mark Lauritsen on the left. And so, a group of 50 or 60 legal scholars and clinicians thought this was a pretty good idea. Right? Oh, there's the blow up of the check. Just so I'm not lying to you. So that's the basic. Idea. Just-in Technology Clinic, a new model for delivery. That's my pitch. But I wanted to add a couple of things to that. One of them is this is just one idea. And I'm seeing more and more ideas about how we use a combination of training law students in e-lawyering skills with free or open source or available tools and either clinic or access to justice things. Maybe it's not exactly this model, but similar things. And because of its win-win-win circle, and it doesn't take a lot of funding, the student pays tuition to do this, right? It's almost the dirty little secret of this. What drives this is the school charges the student to learn how to be a lawyer. Well, they're already doing that, right? But in this case, they actually do learn lawyering that is relevant to the way lawyering seems to be headed, which is to say e-lawyering or unbundled services or cloud lawyering or whatever those things mean, or lawyering on your iPhone, right? Larry Farmer is also working on a project of a course that you're going to be teaching this fall. Is that right? You want to? Actually, I should give you this. Hold on.
I've been working with Mark Lauritsen and Ron Staudt. We have a course we teach called Computer-Based Practice Systems, which uses hot docs. It's a year-long course that teaches students how to build applications. In the past, we've worked with law firms and legal services organizations, and in the winter semester, they actually build applications that can be used by those organizations. And it's a hot docs-based course. What we're going to do this next year is virtualize it. We're going to teach the regular course, but we're virtualizing it and connecting it with this project that Mark and Ron have been spearheading. And we're going to take 20 students who can be online using desktop video conferencing and teach them to use hot docs. In the fall semester, teach them to use the Apps for Justice utility, and then they'll work with legal services people. These can be students, they can be legal services employees, they can be faculty members who want to get involved in this so they can teach these skills in their own law schools. So we have complete latitude as to who the students will be in this class. And it will be online. It will be taught once a week for a couple of hours, an hour and 40 minutes, 2 50-minute classes. And then there will be exercises to do. They'll be reviewed. We're going to have experts looking at their work. And then over the course of the year, they will become proficient in developing, teaching, and authoring these applications, and will produce one application that can be used on the Law Help site. That's the design of the course, and it starts this fall. And we're looking for people from law schools, students, faculty, or legal services people who want to, and we've got some of each right now that are lining up to take the class. And it's taught by Blair Janis, who was one of my students years ago, but now is an expert in these kinds of operations. And I'm going to join him and co-teach the class. Entirely online, entirely synchronous video, shared desktops among all of the students. We've got the infrastructure all in place for it. So it's kind of pilot testing this idea as distributing the authoring skills in a virtual way. Anyway, that's it.
Excellent. So Larry's so Apps for Justice is not just about one project. It's actually sort of a concept now, right? Think meta. Apps generally, which is to say, using technology or using authoring, or sorry, not authoring, using technology to training students in the use of technology to create actual legal product. And if at all possible, make that into a real representation situation, like a clinic. Then you just get triple benefits going on, I think. And that when I run across powerful ideas like that sort of like tick 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 and work, I wonder this could explode. And the commercial version of this is websites like Legalzoom or Direct Law or things like that, and they realize that they can make a lot of money by selling you your incorporation for $295 or your bankruptcy for $15 or something like that. I don't know whether that's a good or bad thing. It looks a little bit to me like those payday loan vendors, but then again, they're at least perceiving that there's this gap, right, between people that want a lawyer and can't afford it, and all these unpaid or out of work lawyers, and we have to fill that gap for the legal aid aspects of it. The TIG money that's been passed out, I'm trying to think how much money CALI actually got to write A2J Author. It's less than $50,000, I think, maybe $100 over the last 4 or 5 years. And the software is, I was talking to the president of the National Center for State Courts. And he's like, he was asked in an interview. That's right. He was asked in an interview, well, what's the best project you worked on? Because he's seen lots of grant money go over the 25 years. And he's like, oh, A2J. I mean, it's like that thing is just like awesome. It's just because so many people are using it and they see the obvious value for it. And so, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just one quick follow-up. I should have mentioned that this, well, it's a pilot this fall. This is a course that's been going on for 27 years. We're just morphing it to delivery and to meet the purposes of the Apps for Justice project. We probably have 50 students going through the course. They altered their legal careers around it. It's a skill that is so special. It isn't that it's going to be a stumbling pilot. It is that we're going to bring the methods that we've been defining for these 27 years to this virtual environment.
Excellent. So, what are your thoughts on Apps for Justice? Go ahead. Yeah.
Hey, John, I have a question. You said it's available in 32 states and countries.
I'm saying 32 states have gotten people to write guided interviews for their states. Yeah. By the way, A2J Author is free to CALI members. You can go to our website, a2jauthor.org, and download it right now. I meant to say that. Did I not say that? and get an account. It's not done through the CALI system because we're sort of looking at the legal aid folks. But with this project, I finally get to take this project. I did a sabbatical about 10 years ago. The board was generous enough to let me go off for a year, and I did a bunch of legal aid automation work, and this was one of the results. And I finally get to take this project and bring it full circle back to CALI and tie in legal aid and CALI, so technology and legal education, in a way that everybody benefits from. So you can download the software now. Now we have another grant to legal services for you techies. A2J Author is written in Flash. It's only installable on Windows. The server side is a Flash player, sort of like CALI Author. Looks a little bit like our lessons. As a matter of fact, it was one of the reasons why we took the project on was the design process for creating a guided interview and for creating a CALI lesson is mentally very similar. And so we were able to use a lot of our interface designs from CALI Author in A2J Author. So in another session that's later today, we're talking about how we've converted CALI Author away from Flash to jQuery. Well, we've got a grant in the LSC to fund us to recode A2J Author as a web-based software as a service in HTML jQuery as well, because with Flash you can't run it on an iPad or an iPhone or something like that. So, I'm sorry. Did you?
You sort of answered my question. I was saying if a Conti library, for instance, downloaded this A2J, then you integrated it and offered it on a specific machine.
I will tell you the issue that you're asking about isn't entirely settled. You need a server, or you need hot docs. You need a document generator, and Law Help Interactive is mostly aimed at the legal aid world. And so when law schools go to them, they want to charge them, or courts want to go to them, they want to charge them because they need to make money to keep sustainable themselves. And so part of our grant is to set up our own server to be able to serve other communities that they aren't funded to address. County law libraries are interesting, right? They sort of fall between all the cracks. They're not a school. They're not a legal aid. They don't give advice. So, but we could accommodate them. You know, if the law librarians there wanted to author guided interviews. I know somebody's got a grant this year to use A2J where it just starts out with what's your legal problem, and it does sort of like a 20 questions thing. And when it comes out to the end, it then gives you a list of websites where you can go do more research on your problem. And that's all it is. It's like a talking search engine-y sort of thing, but a little bit more friendly than just typing sentences into Google and hoping that you're going to find something. Because all the websites that it might send you off to have been vetted by a law librarian or a legal aid attorney. Interesting idea. Question?
What's the learning curve on this? If I wanted to say to work back
Well, it ain't C++, you know, but it isn't PowerPoint. So
there's an authoring guide.
the best way to learn it is there's been a whole bunch of trainings already, and they've all been preserved as screencasts, so you can go watch them. That's the best way to do it.
On the website.
Yeah, somewhere on the website. Yeah. Take the virtual course. Yeah. Yeah. He's saying I'm talking about just law students, but he's saying beyond that. Yeah.
We have a person who was the only
This is what this conference is about. Other questions? So somebody, come on, there's got to be somebody that's like, you know, John, you're crazy. This is not going to work. This is not going to scale. You know, pretty soon there's going to be hundreds of crappy interviews out there giving people bad guidance. What we really need to do is pour more money into human lawyers, because there's nothing like, sitting across from a human being that can, empathize with you. Wrong crowd. Put them on a website.
Can you go back over some of the logistics or the mentoring process, the mechanics of it, if you would? You said these access group apples for justice clinics. You're looking for law students. They're going to have to be mentored or supervised by faculty, I imagine. So you need to buy-in from the faculty. It's not just like a law student who didn't get into clinic and sign up and write a guided interview. I mean, they need some guidance. So it's going to have to be sanctioned by clinic faculty at each given law student.
Yep, it needs to be bootstrapped, is what you're saying.
Right, I'm wondering what your outreach efforts are. You flash by that slide so quickly.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, it's relatively undefined because we're just going for the grant at this point. But there is already a community of 50 to 100 people that have written A2J guided interviews in the legal aid community. And part of the expectation is that we would draw upon them, even hiring them as consultants to do training, or using what Larry's doing, which is a virtual, think GoToMeeting or synchronous video conferencing type stuff, whatever works. But there's no question that there's going to be a phase of train the trainers. We got to train the people who will then train the students. But as you well know, the students coming to this are going to pick it up way faster than their old fogey faculty. You know what I mean? And so we expect it, or it's possible that it would be turned around on us. The students would train the faculty because of the enthusiasm, if they are enthusiastic about it. So.
I guess my other question, this is just coming from the IT side.
Hmm?
Our clinic, and most clinics I assume, get cases referred to them through the legal aid. People can't just walk into our clinic in Carolina and get services. They have to be referred. So we would not end up authoring like a web portal or creating templates and guided interviews for a web portal that we would host. It would be through legal aid of North Carolina.
Absolutely correct. As a matter of fact, Apps for Justice, or at least the project I'm talking about, anticipates that that a local law school clinic would get paired up with the local legal aid people, and you wouldn't have to do any of the work. You wouldn't be creating yet another thing. As a matter of fact, you want to centralize all this onto the statewide website, because when you got a plethora of websites, all sort of doing the similar sort of thing, but none of them being everything to everybody, the poor or the people who need legal help are lost. They're thrashing about, and then they end up on Legalzoom or something like that. And actually, there's a problem, right? There was recently a situation in Texas where one of these nefarious websites went and just scraped all the content off of the legal aid website. It was like lawhelp.org, and they opened wehelplawhelp.com or something like that, or lawhelpplusone.com, and just threw it up there and threw a ton of advertising around it, and of course, when they updated their content on lawhelp.org, they didn't, and that was a problem. So it was weird. They were in a situation where they wanted to give this away, but they had to assert their copyright to stop these guys from essentially doing a bad job. Yeah, but they don't have any copyright attorneys. There's no such thing as a legal aid copyright attorney. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, exactly.
Are you thinking about, you've got the technology. Are you thinking
We
about
have the
things,
technology.
like building in some sort of peer review process so that an author can go ahead and author one of these, but then get it vetted by some other people?
Awesome question. Oh, yeah.
And then,
there are so many.
As an extension to that,
Uh-huh.
okay, it's great today. What about a process of periodic review to make sure that that the form it's outputting is still the form that the court wants?
Oh, yeah. What happens when they change the form? What happens when the law changes? What happens when happens? I mean, all of these issues are problems. And that's one of the reasons why we want to move it into a web service, because when it's a locally installed piece of software, it's a lot harder to manage those processes. It's one of the benefits of it being in XML. I would like, there isn't a lot of metadata right now captured inside of, let me go here. Yeah, there isn't a lot of metadata captured per interview. I mean, we got some like little text boxes, here's your history and stuff like that. I would like to see every question or every legal issue that's inside an interview, what's the thing called? Oh yeah, a cite. Have a cite, to the law. And maybe an open source version of the law. Oh, that's the next session. Yeah. So absolutely. But we can't even begin. We can't begin to solve those problems until this is an onion, right? We're going to start peeling it. The things we can solve now, we peel that back. Then we're going to solve those problems and peel that back, and try to be and deal with the most difficult problem of all, which is the sustainability of the project. What's interesting about this is that CALI entering into this equation, because the legal aid people are like, well, we can't do grants on this across the entire country all the time, and so we can't support a programming staff to keep this going. And I'll go, well, I'll do that because it's of value to my schools who support me and what we do, and then you benefit, and then you bring expertise, that cohort of people that do this, and if you work with the students who are paying tuition, then it becomes a virtuous cycle. I mean, I think it can work. I'm a little cynical about it. I'm like, it's going to blow up somewhere, but I figure, we'll ride the bus until it goes off the cliff,
It'll be a fun journey.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I don't know. There are examples of things like this working, very well. I can't think of any. Linux, Wikipedia, stuff like that. But those are open source projects and more geeky. This is a little more social, and so I don't know, whether it can actually be work. Maybe the volunteers who keep national parks open when the government closes them is an example.
Well, but with some of those questions where I was asking about the peer review, obviously you're going to want
I love the idea of peer review because
to try and get something going with that. But to a certain degree, the periodic review with each fresh crop of students coming into the clinic, you can almost start them out on the training by reviewing existing guided interviews. And they learn that as they're going through.
Do an audit.
And checking to see that it's still valid.
This-
And then they go and build they do a couple of reviews and then go and build one of their own.
Excellent, yeah. In other words, they start out by looking, look, this moat built this last year. We want to make sure it's still extant. So go reproduce the research. I mean, that sounds like a first-year associate at any law firm, right? Doing sort of drudge work. But in this case, it would have actual valuable consequences. Right? 4 minutes left. It's getting warm in here. We're done. Thank you very much.